Alright, people. So, some of you may have absent parental figures in your life. Some of you may not have a family. Some of you may. I didn't have anyone that was necessarily how to throw a punch, things such as that. I kind of got written off. As a temperamental sissy by my parental figures. Now, whether that was I'm here to be the parental figure
Sync has connected to your
for
phone,
those that have absentee
is set to off.
mentors or coaches. I am Coach Franman. Now, do not approach me outside of the confines of these stream settings. Now that we have established a mentor-mentee relationship between me and whoever chooses to be mentored by this, do not approach me outside of the mentor-mentee setting. That is the boundary that I am establishing. Your coach, and you'll know what I mean when you have an actual coach. Like when you have an actual coach and they are someone that is mentoring you, there's almost a degree of kayfabe that needs to happen between you and someone that is mentoring you. And that'll make sense to you when you have an actual coach. And by a coach, I do not mean someone that you are paying for classes. There's a lot of what is called McDojos going around, and what a McDojo is a mentor-mentee environment that is more for profit than it is creating someone that is the best martial artist you can make. There's a lot of, and you'll know this when you enter an actual environment that is meant to create someone that is the most knowledgeable in whatever sport you're trying to make them knowledgeable in. When you're in that setting, you will understand what I mean by an actual coach and a McDojo for-profit coach that is there to have as many people paying him monthly fees as possible. There's a difference between someone who's trying to better the sport by making the best participants in whatever given martial art. There's those coaches, and then there's McDojo coaches that don't care if the people that are rocking their gym t-shirt is not actually able to fight or do any martial art that he is paying you to learn how to do. There's a lot of quote-unquote coaches out there that will have you be paying them for years, and they will have not taught you anything of significance. They will have not pushed you as hard as you can be pushed. You'll know when you have an actual coach, because an actual coach will push you so hard that you will either break or like be the best version of you that you can be. And that is the difference between a coach and a McDojo coach. And it's important to distinguish that. Just when as someone who is seeking knowledge, you need to be able to distinguish if you're putting your time in at a McDojo or a place where you can learn the martial art. If the dude that is teaching you is not putting you in situations where like you are going as hard as you can. Now, granted, with striking, that's different. You don't want to be going as hard as you can when it comes to getting hit in the head. Let me distinguish that. But like with grappling, if you're taking a half-assed wrestling class, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because wrestling is one of those things where you can go 1010% every time you go live in wrestling. There's no reason to ever take it easy when you're grappling. And I assume that carries over to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because the only difference between Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling is there's submissions. You actually have an advantage if you're good at wrestling going into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because if you can defend like a rear naked choke and a guillotine, and you can slip your arm out of an arm bar, like there's not a ton of there's not a lot of people that can just catch anyone in a heel hook. Okay, so when it's grappling classes, if you're not going 110% every time you go live, and you're not being encouraged, and by go live I mean sparring or like for real grappling, not drilling and training and shit like that. If every time you're going 100% is another term, every time you're going 100%, I don't care if it's at an MMA gym or what, because MMA gyms need to do this, because there's no reason to not go 110% when it's grappling. Okay, I understand striking, but there's no reason to say that you're trying to make martial artist if you're running a gym in the United States and you have people not going 110% every time they roll on a mat and grappling, and there's no striking involved. If there's no severe risk of CTE and you're letting the people in your class not go 110%, and you're not like making fun of them for not going 110% in grappling, you're not making people that are good at martial arts. I hate to tell you that, but I can attest to what makes people good at wrestling or not. Okay, you can call my credentials into question as much as you want. I know what makes people actually good at grappling and what doesn't. And what I've seen at the MMA gyms that I've gone to definitely corresponds with what I've heard when it comes to McDojos or whatever, or like for-profit gyms where they're not making people that are actually good at martial arts, and they're just there to get mommy's money because she has a son that gets beat up and she wants her son to be in some form of a martial arts class. This is no different. We're getting into like 70s karate dojo territory when it comes to like walking into a gym and it's like a 150-pound guy with a wife that wants to divorce him, and he's supposedly a badass or whatever, but like his wrestling classes are a joke, his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes are a joke, he only has a boxing coach. Like, those gyms are out there and they'll take your money, and there's no reason for them to be taking anyone's money, let alone like the amount of money that they take a month from people. But that's besides the point. What I'm getting at is what I'm actually able to speak on. And what I'm actually able to speak on is there's, however you find this, if you're an individual that for whatever reason is seeking information about martial arts and you somehow stumble upon this, I'm going to speak about this from the vectors that I'm actually knowledgeable in. I'm going to talk about this from positions where I actually have knowledge. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass and talk about things that I don't actually know. You're not going to see me talking about kickboxing, because I'm not a fucking kickboxer. Okay, I know wrestling and I've done VR boxing and I've taken boxing classes. Okay, so I'm not entirely clueless on boxing, which is probably why I get as far as I get in VR boxing, but I also blend that with my wrestling experience and so on and so forth. So I am here to be the coach that the government has not provided you, because they don't do boxing in school systems, really, as far as I'm aware. It's not around where I live, as far as I'm aware. I am here to be your surrogate father or paternal figure or coach that the government has not provided you, that your parents cannot afford you. When it comes to VR boxing, the realm of VR boxing, I do have some knowledge I've taken boxing classes. Like I said, the only thing I've competed in is wrestling, but I've taken boxing classes at boxing gyms and MMA gyms. That does not make me an expert, which is why I'm talking about this through the vector of VR boxing. With that being said, first things first, forget all of your preconceived notions. Boxing, VR boxing, is a world of its own, even if you've done martial arts such as like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or wrestling. It is very unnatural down to being in an upright stance. Very unnatural motions. These aren't going to be natural motions that you're making. It's not going to make sense to you. Standing upright and trying to hit someone with the front of your fist, like you're not even trying to, like, I mean, you actually want to hit them with this. Ideally you want to hit people with this. You're not supposed to, okay? But like, you're trying to hit people with the front of your fist. That's not a natural motion for a human to make. So you need to try to figure out how to make that feel natural, and that'll make sense to you after you've tried to make the motions like thousands of times. You'll understand what I mean by you need to try to make punching feel like a natural motion for you when you do it. You need to, and here's another thing. When you're in real life, it makes sense to try to have an internal monologue, so to speak. It makes sense if you're taking a test, or if you're doing office work, or if you're having a conversation, to try to have an internal monologue, to try to think in words, so on and so forth, in your head. You don't have time to do that in boxing. And I think a lot of people make that mistake. You don't have time to be in your head in boxing. That's almost what's beautiful about it. When it comes to VR boxing, let me reminder to keep it in the realm of VR boxing, because I'm only speaking from what I've experienced in, as to not piss people off. In the realm of VR boxing, that is almost what makes it beautiful, is you don't have time to think in words. You don't have time to have an internal monologue. But you don't have time to have an internal monologue. And that's something, when you're getting into it, that you need to keep into account, because that may seem like a foreign concept to you at first. I could imagine it definitely did to me, but like, you need to be in a mental state to where your mind is completely clear. You need to actually not be thinking. Okay? You need to have your technique and understanding of what you're going to do when you're in there so ingrained in you that you don't have to think about it, if that makes sense. You need to have your boxing, so like your VR boxing meta, so ingrained into your head that it needs to be instinct. Your reactions need to be instinctual. Your thoughts and about the technique that you're going to implement needs to be instinctual. You need to have such an understanding of it that you need to be able to not think about it while you're boxing. Like, you need to have no thoughts in your head, and it has to be entirely reactionary for you to get anywhere in VR boxing. If you want to get anywhere in VR boxing, you got to listen to Coach Franman here. I am the surrogate father that the government did not pay for, here to coach you on VR boxing. I'm going to coach you to success in VR boxing. And in order to do that, when you're actually doing VR boxing, you got to have your meta, as in what you're going to do, how you're going to react, what punches you're going to rely on, how you're going to move when this person moves this way. All of that needs to be so in your head that you don't have an internal monologue about it, because your reactions need to be that quick. Your reactions need to be so quick when you're doing VR boxing that you don't have time to have an internal monologue, is what I'm trying to tell you. You don't have time to have an internal monologue. You don't have time to think in your head in real time, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. It's instinctual. Your reactions need to be instinctual. There needs to be no internal monologue in your head of this person's doing this, I'm gonna do that. It all has to be nonverbal down to in your head nonverbal. Every thought in your head needs to occur so quickly that it might as well be as if you're not thinking at all. And that's how you have to react to have success in VR boxing. You need to let your reptile brain back here do all of the communicating for the rest of your brain, as in, if as far as you're concerned, there needs to be nothing going on in here except reactions and non-verbal reactions when you're doing VR boxing in order for you to have success in it. So with that being said, how do you learn anything when you're boxing? If that makes sense. How do you learn it? And the thing is, thankfully you're in luck because boxing is basically checkers, but we'll get to that after I get out of this parking lot. We'll continue. Coach Franman will continue being the surrogate mentor that the government did not provide for you to teach you how to throw your arms at people in VR boxing after I finish putting gasoline. It's pissing me off already. It's already making me mad.
Sync has connected to your phone and is reminding you that 911 assist is set to off.
Oh, I'm so gonna use the fucking glue on this. I'm so gonna use the glue on this when I get back. But for now, you're going to be right here until I figure something out. Now you're going to be right here until I figure something out. And then once I get back, I'm going to use the glue. But for now, you're right here. Now we have a whole new angle, and it's also a terrible angle because it's like down here, and it's like, why is it down here? Like, why is it not more level with my face, right? Like, I think the same thing. I'm thinking the same thing. Like, why is it not more up here? No one likes a like below angle on a face, really. But this is what we got to do for now, at least, until I get the gluage out, until I get the fast setting gluage out. But okay, so back to Coach Franman, the surrogate paternal mentor figure that the government never paid for to teach you about striking specifically and not grappling. I am your government taxpayer funded mentor figure about VR boxing, VR striking that the government never paid for to give you. And we're here. Coach Franman's gonna get you up to speed. We're gonna make a good striker out of you, a good VR striker out of you. So first things first. First things first, right? Forget everything you know. Forget all your preconceived notions, okay? About people, about what makes someone strong, about what a strong person looks like. Admit that you do not know when you look at someone what they're capable of. That's the first thing you got to do to be a good VR boxer. Is you got to forget everything you know. You got to forget your preconceived notions, because at the end of the day, what fighting actually is math that is so complex. It's doable. It's possible for humans to do the math, but there's so many factors. There's so much math and physics involved when it comes to striking. There's so much that is up to individual there is so much that is up to like individual genetics and circumstances, and how that person is even doing that day can determine the outcome of a VR boxing match, right? So, well, it can determine the outcome of a boxing match in general, but even a VR boxing match. So, what we're getting at here, right, people? What we're getting at here is you need to admit that when you look at someone, you do not actually know what their anatomy is capable of doing, or how you're going to be able to react to what their anatomy is capable of doing that day when you enter a VR boxing match. A lot of people, I can tell, especially people that may be fed, like people who okay, so for you, it plays to your advantage if someone looks at you and dismisses you. It may or may not play to your advantage, right? It is possible for you to use it to your advantage in theory if someone underestimates you by looking at you and assuming that you're weak. It usually only hurts your opponent to underestimate you. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's actually good to be arrogant, right? Sometimes it's good to underestimate your opponent. Sometimes it's good to be overconfident. Sometimes misplaced confidence can in fact lead to victory. No one's saying that being an egotistical narcissist no one's saying it's impossible to be an egotistical narcissist and win. But it is also possible to lose because you're underestimating someone. Okay? It's also possible to lose because you're underestimating someone. And you, my pupil, right? You, my mentee, I don't want you to lose because you've fallen into the trap of trying to profile people, okay? We are not the Federal Bureau of Investigation, right? We're not in the profiling business. We don't need to have any notions about anything based on how our opponent looks, because we're doing what? We're reacting to what's actually happening, okay? We're using our reptile brain to establish a game plan based on what we're actually witnessing, because I want you to understand boxing so fundamentally that you're developing a game plan against each individual opponent that you have right then and there, okay? I want you to understand boxing so much, VR boxing, I want you to understand VR boxing so much that you don't need a corner, that you don't need someone to tell you how to react. You don't need someone to give you a game plan 3 months before you go against the person. I want you to understand VR boxing so much that you don't need preconceived notions about what your opponent is capable of based on their skin tone or this, that, and the other. Okay, I want you to react to what is actually going on in front of you, and I want you to use that like algebra to pick your opponent apart. Okay, that's what I want you to do. I don't want you to be like everyone else and fight with your ego and fight with your preconceived notions and Cuban boxing and Puerto Rican boxing. None of that. I don't want any of that. You know why? Because you're not gonna win. You're not gonna win thinking that Cuba is the mythical mecca of boxing. You're not gonna win thinking that Puerto Rico holds all of the keys and secrets to being a great VR boxer. Okay? We don't need to do that. We don't need to think that the Soviet Union held all of the secrets to VR boxing. That's not how I want you to operate as my mentee. As my mentee, I do not want you to think that Cuba is the mythical mecca of boxing and that you can only obtain true mastery of boxing by traveling to Cuba and learning from a Cuban boxer. I don't need you to be thinking like that. I need you to want to understand boxing so much that it doesn't matter where you are or who you're going against. I want you to be such a pupil of VR boxing, meta and technique. And here's how you're going to do it. Okay? You're going to study boxing technique, and then you're going to strap the VR boxing headset on your head, and then you're going to go and you're going to try trial and error. Try to implement what you have learned about boxing. Okay? Try to implement. So what by this, what do I mean? Let me now that I've stopped driving, what do I mean by all this? What is this crazy man saying, and what does all of this mean? What all of this means is that you have an advantage if you listen to me. If you listen to me, you have an advantage that so many VR boxers don't have. Okay? VR boxers are fools, and I mean no offense to this, they're fools playing checkers, okay? They're fools that are playing checkers, okay? VR boxers, and listen to me good, this is why boxing is in the state it's in. VR boxers think that like Puerto Rico is the mecca of boxing and it holds all the keys and secrets and good coaches to boxing. They think Kazakhstan is the mythical holy land that only Kazakhstanian men produce boxers, and no, that's not how VR boxing works. That's not the truth of VR boxing. It never has been and it never will be. You need to not care what the person you're going against looks like. They are a person with 4 appendages, and there is math behind what's going on. Okay, there's math and anatomy and science and physics behind what's going on. Okay, you don't need to be a bodybuilder. You don't need to be a Nigerian specimen. You don't need to be some genetically masterful Nigerian specimen to be able to put a VR boxing headset on and beat almost every person you go against. All you need to do is pull up YouTube videos and you just need to pull up YouTube videos and you need to look up what a jab is. Okay? You need to look up what a jab is. You need to look up what a feint is. You need to like look up 3-point push-ups and burpees. And there's not much that I get. These people are fools that are playing checkers. Let me tell you how. Let me tell you how these VR boxers are fools that are playing checkers. Okay? A jab and a cross are the 2 safest things. I don't care what anyone says. if you want me to point you as your mentor in the direction to start looking for knowledge about VR boxing, all you need to do is look at footwork. Don't look at footwork drills. You don't want some McDojo coach giving you like 3/4 of what he means by what he's saying, and you got to pay $4,000 for the other quarter of the 3/4 of what he's giving you when it comes to technique. Just look up the fundamentals of footwork. Look at how to get into a stance. Look at how to take steps, because everything else you got to figure out on your own from there. Okay, you got to figure out what works for you from there. And I'm being so serious with you right now. Like, you got to figure out, because no one can do it but you, right? Like, no one's going to get in there and do it for you but you. You have to do it at the end of the day. You got to move your feet. You got to move your hands, right? So you need to look up footwork videos. Like, just look up how to get into a stance. Look up how to get into a stance. Look up how, and again, everything from there, you got to figure out what works for you. Don't let a coach tell you this is the way to do it. Don't let them tell you in Puerto Rico we do it like this and no one can do it, but the way we do it in Puerto Rico, oh, this is how our stance works in Nigeria. No one can do it but us Nigerians, and you got to do it the way us Nigerians tell you to get into a boxing stance. Otherwise, you're not doing it right. No, it can look as ugly as you want it to look. It can look as untechnical as you want it to look. It can look as ugly as you want it to look. But at the end of the day, no one's going to get in there and do the VR boxing for you but you. And if what you're doing works, it works. It doesn't matter if they think they got the best stance in Nigeria and they think only Nigerian men can produce Nigerian VR boxers that get in Nigerian VR boxing stances the right way. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what people's preconceived notions are. It doesn't matter how ugly it looks. It doesn't matter how against the rule book it looks. If it works against your opponent, you did it because you came up with that read in that instance, because you are you with your anatomy, and the math worked that way when you did it against that opponent that specific day. It doesn't matter what people think. A lot of people want to say there's a way to do things. There's not a way to do things. There's not a way to VR box. You want to know why there's not a way to VR box? Because you could be the best VR boxer in the world if you do it your own way, and they won't know that your way works because they might have never dealt with someone that has your specific anatomy, your specific fast twitch muscle fibers, your specific neurological makeup, your specific gut biome, your specific leg and femur length, your specific shin length, your specific ankles. Like, the reason there's so many different boxing styles and techniques out there is because at the end of the day, this is math and physics and anatomy and science. So there's no cookie cutter way that's going to make sense to everyone. So that's why you have to learn the fundamentals. You have to learn the fundamentals, and then you have to go from there and figure out what's going to work for you. And then on top of that, this is why I'm trying to tell you, as your mentor, you need to have no preconceived notions when you're going against an opponent in VR boxing, because what they tell you to do may not work against that specific person you're going against. It may not work against that specific person that you're going against. I'm telling you. I'm telling you as a person with a lot of experience in combat sports. You can take what you need to ingrain is the fundamentals. I want you to ingrain the fundamentals. How to throw it, how to throw a jab, how to throw a hook, how to throw a cross, how to get in a stance. And it doesn't need to be whatever coach you looked up that shows you how to get in a stance. You don't have to do it that specific way and no other way. Just learn vaguely how to get into a stance, learn vaguely how to throw a jab, learn vaguely how to throw a cross, learn vaguely how to throw hooks, and then I want you to start learning what works for you from there. Start learning what works for you from there, and a good way to do that is to do the VR boxing, because that's pretty close to sparring. Um, if you already got a VR headset, it's pretty close to sparring. But I'm being so serious, like, this is a good way to learn what actually works for you implemented in practice, because you can know if you're going to get hit or not, how hard you're going to get hit, taking that risk in that moment, throwing that punch that way. So everything that someone's trying to tell you about, oh, well, if you're doing Cuban style boxing, you got to do it this way, or if you're doing Japanese boxing, you got to do it this way. There's no place in the world that produces the best at anything 100% of the time. There's no secret way to do this. There's no specific secret way to do this, because you are you with your anatomy and your fast twitch muscle fibers, this, that, and the other. So, like, what I'm telling you is a good way to get on the right track. Learn the fundamentals. Don't learn Cuban Pete's fundamentals of how to be the best Cuban boxer in Cuban Pete's McCuban dojo over in Cuba. Learn the fundamentals, and then learn what works for you.